Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full X-Men 97 episode 4 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, heavy video game references here, but also a bit of a two-part episode as part of a larger multi-episode arc. There are like references within references within references this week. We'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I do videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get them all. This is like the beginning of X-Men coming back this year. We have all these episodes, then we have Deadpool and Wolverine with a bunch of X-Men coming back in live action, and eventually the live-action MCU reboot version of the X-Men movies too. Careful for spoilers from the episode if you haven't seen it yet. We'll start at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments. Starting with the episode title, Motendo/Life Death Part 1. Like it was a two-part episode with like a mini arc for Jubilee, and the second part of the episode was the beginning of a two-arc episode for Storm. A lot of references in the titles, obviously. Motendo, a reference to Mojo coming back, Mojo World. Nintendo with the video game reality that he makes Jubilee and Sunspot fight in. The Storm arc, Life Death, is a reference to the comic book arc from the X-Men comics of the same name. That story was all about Storm and Forge getting together. It was like her first big love interest in the comics, and it was all about how Storm got her groove back, basically. Which is kind of what she's doing on the show right now, like she's trying to get her powers back, how Storm got her groove back. One of the other major callbacks to the classic series with the way they're structuring this episode 2 is the whole concept of multi-episode arcs in the first place, like part 1, part 2, part 3. They did that in the classic series. If you're talking about the Phoenix arc, for instance, they did a Phoenix arc and a Dark Phoenix arc, which were each 4 episodes apiece, so like 8-episode arc of the Phoenix. And way back in the 90s, when this originally happened, they weren't really doing multi-episode serialized arcs on children's television the same way. Like, this was a really big deal. Nowadays, they don't really do the part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, like they'll just say one episode, next episode. So them actually putting the part 1 in the title is a bit of a throwback to the original series. There'll be a couple other episodes this season, probably in season 2, season 3, like future seasons of the show where they do that as well. Like they do multi-episode arcs and they use the part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. There was a minor change during the Marvel Studios intro, like the Marvel Animation intro. They give it a custom Nintendo 8-bit style version of the Marvel Studios theme song because of the video game theme that they start with in the episode. There's a lot of 8-bit, 16-bit music that they do in the episode. Mostly versions of X-Men the Animated Series theme music. This time during the X-Men intro, they added a couple new scenes, this time of Jubilee and Longshot from Mojo World fighting Mojo. Longshot was in both of the original Mojo World episodes. This is meant to be a new scene of X-Factor to reference the Forge part of the episode too, like this is Forge's team, X-Factor from the comics. Notice this is Polaris, Havoc, one of Cyclops' brothers, Wolverine, Forge. I'm not sure who the blue person in the X-Men suit is meant to be. Maybe this is Multiple Man if we're talking about X-Factor. But the reason the camera zooms in on Forge is because this is a big Forge episode. This is meant to be a new scene of the Hellfire Club during Morph's vision of Mr. Sinister, like it transitions to Professor X trying to see the Hellfire Club in their lair, but notice that Emma Frost blocks his vision as the doors close to represent her blocking him. You also notice he's still wearing the military jacket from the Phoenix arc in the classic episodes too. But he hasn't come back on the show yet. There's been a lot of new scenes in the intro of Professor X, just to foreshadow him eventually coming back, probably by the end of the season. During this Hellfire Club scene, they also just show the current roster. It's the same as the original series. Sebastian Shaw, Emma Frost, Donald Pierce, and Harry Leland. We'll probably see a version of them pop up on the show in the next couple of episodes. Usually that's what they've been doing, like they introduce new scenes in the intro and then they either debut those new characters in this episode or in like the following episodes. Then during the opening scene, the episode starts with the Motendo storyline because it's Jubilee's birthday. They're in the X-Mansion, notice the 90s looking coffee maker, their X-Men branded coffee mugs. They drink out of X-Men branded coffee mugs, probably to remind you that you can buy this merch in real life, like please buy our merch. There's a ton of X-Men 97 branded versions of the toys too, based on this new animated episodes. Like I bought a Magneto helmet you could go out in real life and buy right now. Notice Gambit is in his ripped t-shirt from the basketball game earlier in the series. The actor who does Gambit's voice also went to a convention recently wearing this t-shirt in real life. I don't know if you can actually buy the shirt in real life though, or if he just had it made special for that convention. Rogue makes all kinds of jokes and references to Magneto beating Gambit to the quote-unquote pot, which is also meant to be a metaphor for her getting it on with him. Magneto also follows up on the joke using his magnetism to put a bunch of sugars in her coffee. But I think this whole relationship twist with Magneto and Storm is meant to be a bit of a misdirect, and they never actually got it on. Like, it's just meant to be him imagining that they might be doing that, because that'd be a lot of people's fears. Like, oh my god, what Magneto is probably doing with Rogue, though, is probably teaching her how to be with Gambit without hurting him. Like, Magneto's probably using his abilities to help Rogue figure out how to do that without killing Gambit. He orders a bunch of Danger Room drills all day, even though it is Jubilee's 18th birthday. Wolverine's Rogaine ad joke is all about Beast's fur. Rogaine is a hair growth treatment.
Who's the furball?
Hank McCoy.
Magneto wanting Jubilee to learn to master her powers is also a bit of foreshadowing for later in the episode when she sees the older version of herself who has mastered all of her powers and is crazy powerful. Jubilee's actual powers are basically what you see from that older version later in the episode. The full extent of them allow her to create much bigger explosions and also detonate objects on the subatomic level, which is why later in the episode, one of their explosions looks like a giant atom. Very meta Easter egg here too. The person voicing the older version of Jubilee is actually the original voiceover actor that voiced Jubilee during the original X-Men the Animated Series episodes. If you haven't been able to tell, it's been a different voiceover actor doing the young version of Jubilee in the new episodes so far.
Like I said, we go way back. Gonna hit pause here for a second. I got a few questions.
She's also got a natural passive resistance against psychic attacks from people like Emma Frost or other evil psychics. Notice Morph makes the awkward joke about Magneto's tragic childhood, reminding them that his parents died when he was a child during World War II because of the Holocaust. Now, don't you feel bad for making that wisecrack, Morph? You can decide which X-Men character has the most tragic backstory. But basically, you can't really consider yourself an X-Men character if you do not have a tragic backstory. They use her request to visit the video game arcade to set up the whole Mojo World twist with them getting stuck in the actual game reality, and then remind you that Sunspot is still with them and he and Jubilee have something of a relationship developing between them, which they finally consummate at the end of the episode. Notice when she gets pissed off, she's still using 80s, 90s slang because this is set during the late 90s. The fact she has the CRT TV in her room, not a flat screen TV. She's also got what look like some comic book long boxes on her dresser. Sunspot reminds her of Genosha, Magneto's Mutant Island refuge, which they mentioned last week too. It's where he sent the Morlocks to, and also to set up the Genosha twist later in the episode when they get stuck there in the video game. Jubilee makes a couple McDonald's references, small fries, Big Mac. Then you see the video game console on her dresser. It's black, but there's a cartridge in it, so I'll say it looks more like a cross between a Sega Genesis crossed with a Nintendo because the Mo-Tendo for Mojo. But if we're talking about late 90s, like the current console would technically be the Sega Saturn, like all CD-based systems like the PlayStation. The Nintendo 64, so like we'd be entering the 64-bit era of gaming right now. Most of the actual video game graphics that they do in the episode, though, are 16-bit based. The artwork on the cover of the cartridge is meant to be patterned after X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, which was released on Super Nintendo, so it was released as an actual cartridge, so they are accurate to that. The funny thing about this episode, too, is that I've actually been playing a lot of classic arcades, the Marvel vs. Capcom games. Some of the episode did reference the Marvel vs. Capcom games, but the other real big video game reference here was X-Men Children of the Atom. You can let me know in the comments if you're old enough to have played that on the actual console when it was first released, or if you got it later in life. The actual console traps her in Sunspot, the music changes to the 8-bit style as they're pulled into the world of the game. There's a dial-up internet sound of them getting connected to the internet, so doesn't everybody feel nostalgic now? Nobody try to make a phone call while they're trying to use the internet. This whole video game reality just plays like a virtual reality environment, like you die in the game, you die in real life, essentially. And pretty much all the music in the episode for the rest of the time that they're in the game plays with 8-bit or 16-bit versions. They're attacked by a Sentinel. Jubilee gives Sunspot a bit of a call to action about using his powers, like getting comfortable with being a mutant, and he sort of explains why he hasn't told his parents yet. Like, that's part of his arc in the series. Eventually, he gets over it, and he'll probably eventually join the X-Men. They wind up traveling through a bunch of Jubilee's recent memories and other villains that they've faced in their real life, even though we're talking about a TV show, so it's not real life. But that's why they're fighting the Friends of Humanity with the brand new Sentinel arm cannons, because like they just recently faced them. Bunch more relics from the 90s, like there's an actual phone booth. You can still find some phone booths in public, but they're super rare nowadays. There are a bunch of references to the Matrix movie tropes too here, where they answer the phone and it transports them to a different level in the game, just like in the Matrix. When they transition to the Genosha level, there's a classic video game loading screen. Games still have those even in present day, they've just gotten more evolved. And I think part of the reason for them going to Genosha in the next level is to also foreshadow them going back to Genosha in the present day of the series. Like, eventually we will go back there. But in the game reality, it's her revisiting the island when she was stuck there in a previous classic episode of the series. Like, she references being there with Storm and Gambit previously. That was back when Bolivar Trask was controlling it during the original series. So that's why they have a bunch of these different mutants being forced to serve him. This is the Blob, this is Sunfire, not Pyro, although Pyro does show up later in the episode. Notice when they start firing the blaster shots, they make video game sounds. Jubilee makes the Hot Topic reference because of the suit, but technically she's making fun of herself because this is like an alternate older version of Jubilee. Mojo finally reveals himself, and it's a new voiceover actor, but he looks way thinner than he did before because he's lost a ton of weight, claiming that it's because he's malnourished because his TV shows have not been doing well, and he survives based on ratings. Like, the more the ratings, the more powerful he gets. He references the original Mojo World episodes of the classic animated series and shows footage from those episodes, but they reanimated the characters in the new style of this show. So this is Wolverine in those classic episodes fighting Pyro, Gladiator from the Shi'ar Empire, also kind of to remind you that we will see the Shi'ar characters come back too when Professor X eventually comes back. Then they reveal the real world of Mojo World and everybody around in the arena watching the game TV show. He name drops Dazzler, who did show up in the original animated episodes and briefly in live action a couple times. They reference her during X-Men Apocalypse. Jubilee was also featured as a character during that. Briefly, like, she wasn't a huge character. She was also briefly in X-Men Dark Phoenix, and there are rumors that Taylor Swift is also playing a version of Dazzler in Deadpool and Wolverine. Not totally sure about that. Like, I'm not expecting her to actually be Dazzler. She might just have a cameo as herself. Like, she might just be playing a version of Taylor Swift in the movie. Mojo makes a ton of references to songs and TV shows in real life. Like, she says, his gamer girl in a gamer world. That's a reference to the Barbie World song, which was just featured in the Barbie movie. Mojo claims he's going to essentially conquer all of reality, every dimension, with his new game-based TV show and the console he created, making him all-powerful because the better his ratings, like the more people that watch his show, the more powerful he gets. Perfectly balanced is all TV shows should be. When he references the 18 to 45 age demographic, that's a reference to real-life TV shows and advertisers. They're like the sweet spot in terms of marketing to populations for TV shows and commercials, the group of people that most shows try to appeal to. They show a couple depictions of the classic X-Men and the new X-Men as Mojo is trying to win her to his cause, like, no, get rid of the old stuff, in with the new. Who's the Boss was also a real TV show with Tony Danza. A Different World was also a real-life TV show in the 90s. Notice a bunch of new characters here too, like Forge is there with his same suit he was wearing last week when he met Storm, because they're in the second half of this episode. This person behind Rogue is actually Jack Frost, not Iceman, and the person behind Storm is Darwin. They're really using a bunch of opportunities here to just work in cameos from like other random X-Men characters all over the place. They make a divorce court reference, also a real-life TV show, to reference Jean Grey and Cyclops in the drama between them now. Like, we're talking full soap opera because of what happened with Madeline Pryor, getting it on with a clone of Jean and having a baby with her, aka Cable. Cannot wait for them to have that conversation. So you screwed the clone. Yeah, I definitely screwed that clone. Most people just wondering why Wolverine did not smell that it was a clone. Like, you do not smell like Jean Grey. You are not her. Then they transition to the X-Men fighting game graphics based more on X-Men Children of the Atom video game and a little bit Marvel vs. Capcom. Let Magneto sprites form on the monitor. They transition to the title screen, The Rise of Jubilee. Most of this is all based on Children of the Atom though. That was actually a really solid game back in the day. Notice how detailed they got with the title screen too, like zoom and enhance, copyright 1997, because this is meant to take place in the year 1997. The show is called X-Men 97. The music playing on the loading screen is an 8-bit version of X-Men the Animated Series theme song. The character select screen, also based on the classic X-Men fighting games. They also feature Colossus, Magic. I'm not sure who's right next to her, but on the far right, that is very clearly the adult version of Cable. Very apropos because we just saw baby Cable, and we will see adult Cable also coming back soon. This poster, when they drop down, is meant to be a reference to Days of Future Past with all the different X-Men characters. In the actual video game screen, when it's 4x3 and they're fighting the characters here, it's meant to look like it's right out of the Children of the Atom game. Mojo starts to restore himself, soaking in the extra ratings, getting more and more powerful. They travel to the next level in the game, which is the Savage Land. Fighting Sauron is the big boss there. Notice when they transition to the crowd in the real world of Mojo World watching the game on the screens, you see some scrolls in the background. We see Spiral at Mojo's controls trying to mess with the game to stop the older version of Jubilee from hacking the game. And the final stage is meant to be on Asteroid M, Magneto's asteroid base from the classic episodes, and he is the final boss, so to speak, at least in this part of the game, because he was also the antagonist to Jubilee on her birthday, not wanting her to have fun. Remember, all this game is generating based on her memories, so she kind of hates Magneto right now, which is why he is meant to be this final boss. Sunspot gets to be the one to try and give Jubilee the talking to about growing up a little, like, time to grow up, you turned 18. Notice this version of Magneto in the game also has a 16-bit sounding version of his voice effects. They got really detailed with their video game mechanics too, like she starts referencing learning the boss mechanics of the fight so she can defeat Magneto. Notice the extra life for Roberto is an X-Men symbol. I think this is also meant to be a metaphor for him eventually joining the X-Men at some point. And they reveal the woman who's been helping them this whole time was an older version of herself, Jubilee, based on Absissa character from the comics, who's also an alternate reality future version of Jubilee, who's a slave to Mojo. They changed the original comics, but they're kind of doing the original comics a little bit. She takes them to an alternate server outside of the main game with all the X-Men figures around them, like her own little X-Men lair. Notice in the background on the screen up in the top here, this is the poster for X-Men the Animated Series in real life. You can tell, like, all points during this, the writers, all the animators just trying to, like, work in every little detail in the background, every reference they could possibly do. You could probably watch these episodes like 3 or 4 more times and still find some details in the background. She explains that she's basically like a digital replica of Jubilee that was created to beta test the game for Mojo before they brought the real Jubilee and Sunspot in. So she's lived for a lifetime testing the game out, but also used that to perfect her powers, showing Jubilee how powerful she can get when she can fully utilize her own abilities. They start talking about video game bugs, cheat codes, workarounds. An older Jubilee gives younger Jubilee sort of like the talking to that actually gives her the call to action. Okay, it is time to grow up now. Notice Mojo also crawls through a version of the classic X-Men arcade game. Like, this looks pretty close to what the classic arcade actually looked like. You can actually buy some replicas of this in present day now too. And basically turns into like a final boss fight for them to take down so that they can escape. Older Jubilee teams up with younger Jubilee, they combine their powers, you see some of the full extent of what they'll look like when she becomes more powerful. And because this is all about TV show mechanics, Mojo makes a reference to the TV show itself being cancelled and them defeating him. The weird thing here though is that Spiral, who is his servant, seems kind of happy that he's down for the count, like it seems like she's trying to take over temporarily while he's down. There's a quick transition as they switch to the Storm and Forge part of the episode, the Life-Death Part 1 of this arc. This is adapted from the comic book arc of the same name with some changes, like Forge's house is in the countryside and it's super lo-fi, as opposed to the comic book version where it was super high-tech. But it plays out similar to the way that comic book arc played out. Forge references Professor X having saved him in the past, so he wants to repay the favor. Also, he's got the guilt of creating the tech that took her powers away from her. They explain his powers. Basically, what they tell you in the series is the way they work in the comics. He can basically understand any kind of technology and create anything he can imagine. For instance, he could look at Tony Stark's Infinity Stone gauntlet and create like a much better version of that instantly. He's called an intuitive genius, like he can create anything that he can think of. The limitation to that is that he doesn't always have the materials he needs to actually create the stuff that he wants to create or the money or the resources to do it. Like, he can make anything, but you actually have to physically bring him all the materials to make it. He can't magic up the materials. The episode basically plays out like how Storm got her groove back, but like I said, it's a 2-part episode. Notice the picture on the wall. There's a bunch of references here. This is Forge with his X-Factor team from the comics. This is Quicksilver, Havoc, also Cyclops' brother, like I said, Polaris, who's also Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's sister, Wolfsbane, Madrox, and Multiple Man. He uses his machine to try and reactivate her powers with his technology, but it doesn't work right away because this is a bit like Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire having the quote-unquote web block. It's more of an existential kind of problem. So before Storm can access her powers again, this is kind of like the comic book life-death arc. She has to make it through this existential crisis. She has to deal with her internal trauma and move past it. Forge admits to being in love with Storm. In the comics, Forge was like her first real big love interest that she ever had. Most people, when they think of Storm being in love with people, they just think about her relationship with Black Panther, but the relationship with Forge happened way, way earlier in the comics. When he tells her about dealing with his own personal trauma, this is all right out of the comics. It was the Vietnam War in the comics where he lost his limbs. He reveals after the war he made a deal with the government to create anti-mutant tech, essentially the same tech used to take Storm's powers, in exchange for the resources to build his prosthetic limbs and other machines. Like I said, his big problem is they didn't always have the resources or the materials to build the stuff that he wants to build. So essentially, he is responsible for Storm losing her powers. It's a huge betrayal, big WTF moment. When she takes off, then falls back to Forge's house in this sort of nightmare reality of hers, this is meant to be the adversary from the comics, a mystical entity who's been an enemy of Forge's, mostly. That's probably why he's appearing in this house, in Forge's house. Notice the voice of the adversary is also Storm's voiceover actor, so it sounds more like evil Storm talking to herself. They're not really clear what his ultimate goal is on the series, but in the comics originally he was trying to destroy all of reality and reshape it in his own image. Perfectly balanced, as all universes should be. But here's the connection back to the Jubilee part of the episode. Like, this is the reason why they paired those two episodes together, because the adversary in the comics also views himself like a game master of sorts, messing with the reality the same way that Mojo was doing in the first part of the episode. So even though the characters are dealing with slightly different problems, it's the same type of twist, like how Jubilee got her groove back and how Storm got her groove back. But they end on a cliffhanger, the reveal of the adversary, and they won't resolve it until 2 weeks later. Like, they're skipping part 2 of this episode. It won't be for another 2 weeks, with Storm probably regaining access to her powers. Don't worry, they're not going to do her dirty like that, one of the most powerful mutants in the comics. So many people were upset after episode 3, like, how dare you take Storm's powers, give them back right now. They didn't really make any changes to the end credits from last week, but if there were any other Easter eggs or references during the episode that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, write them below in the comments, because there were many. Like, there are so many details that they work into this episode. My full episode 5 video will post next week after they release it. There's a bunch of other big stuff coming up, so make sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. The Invincible Season 2 finale will be tomorrow, so that'll be one of my next big videos. Click here for that. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my other X-Men episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.